shall arise in body or spirit and join in singing our in-gathering song number 361, Enter, Rejoice, and Come In.
As we begin, I ask that you please place your electronic devices in worship mode. Thank you. I invite you to enjoy the chapel in the back of the sanctuary and to note the joys and concerns in the book there. Please feel free to share a joy or concern there. Children are always welcome in this sanctuary at all times during the service. If you'd like to have us take care of your little ones during the service, we have a nursery downstairs. We also broadcast the service on closed circuit TV downstairs in the social hall and the nursery. After the service, everyone is invited downstairs for coffee and snacks and excellent company. Please note the announcements in your order of service, which include many ways to participate in the life of this vibrant community. In the words of Rumi, come, come, whoever you are. Whether you come with laughter in your heart or tears, you are welcome here. No matter where you've been, no matter where you're going, you are welcome here. No matter what body brought you in the door, no matter who you love, you are welcome here. Whether you believe in God all of the time, or some of the time, or none of the time, you are welcome here. If you come with an open mind, a loving heart, and willing hands, you are welcome here at South Valley Unitarian Universalist Society.
Good morning. I want to add my welcome today. I'm Lori Quigley, President of the Board of Trustees, and it's my privilege today to introduce our guest minister. For the past couple of months, you've been hearing an awful lot from me about please nominate people you trust for the Ministerial Search Committee and all the things we've been doing to prepare for our search for our next settled minister. And I remember telling a few of you at some of the gatherings, but sometime our coach will come, and he knows what he's talking about, so he can tell you the answers that I don't know. Well, he's here. This is Reverend Christian Schmidt. He is our regional transitions coach, and he will be assisting our congregation during this time of ministerial transition and our search for a settled minister. He is the senior co-minister of the UU Church of Berkeley, California, with his wife, the Reverend Kristen Gressel Schmidt. They live in the Bay Area with their 4 kids and 1 cat. Welcome, Reverend Schmidt.
Since I sent you that, we've added fish to the clubhouse. That was not my choice. I had 2 things I was asked just to mention to you. One is that Katie and Ryan, whose last name I don't remember, welcomed baby Eleanor Kestrel this week. I assume we'll see them all again soon. And a number of our members, I'm not upset that people didn't come here, because a number of our members are down at Temple Square in a demonstration, not a protest because they don't have a permit. But in response to the LDS's policies and changes and all sorts of things, I'm sure y'all know far more about that than I do. But let me open us with these words. Welcome, friends, and thank you for welcoming me. This is a place of love, a community that opposes oppression in all its forms. A community that boldly proclaims that our common humanity matters more than the differences that attempt to divide us. This is a congregation that works together, sharing our gifts and resources, our ideas and opinions, our hearts, minds, bodies, and souls for our common purpose. So welcome, friends, to this time together. And let us open once again in song. If you would rise in body or spirit to sing number 347, Gather the Spirit.
One invited Anita Thalen to light our chalice. Please join us in saying our chalice lighting words. We light this chalice for the warmth of love, for the light of truth, and for the energy of action. Thank you. You may be seated.
So, I'm Janessa Hansen, and this is why I'm here. I owe going to church because of my mom. When she was growing up, my mom was part of the LDS church. Eventually, I know that the church's beliefs didn't sit right with her. She began her search for a new church that would satisfy her spiritual needs in the craziest way an old person would: the internet. I like to imagine the funny searches she might have had on Google trying to find the right church. Maybe something like radically inclusive church I can actually raise children in so they won't feel indoctrinated. Or perhaps a little classier, churches that aren't actually a cult for once. Regardless of whatever searches she put into Google, she ended up here at South Valley Unitarian Universalist Society. Now, my story with this church wasn't as solid as it is now. As I said, I came here when I was young, but I actually didn't like the church all that much. Ever since I started, there was nobody in my grade. I was always the youngest or the oldest in the class. I really just wanted to sleep in, as you probably understand. But my mom persisted that my dad and I come to church. And when I got there, it was never as bad as I thought it was going to be. Who knew making crafts for an hour and a half would be so bad? On January 2nd, 2012, my mom passed away from a pulmonary embolism. It was very sudden. That night, I was telling her goodnight and she was too tired to respond. The next morning, she died on the way to the hospital. Great way to start a new year, right? Her funeral was held here. I won't go into detail because I don't want to get you all freaked out about there was a dead body here. Then again, it is a church, so you should just expect that. Regardless, I'll tell you how I felt. I was scared. I didn't know how to deal with death. Sure, I'd been to grandparents' funerals, but never really knew them that well. This was entirely different. She was my mother. So for most of the service, I hid downstairs. Trista Emmer, the DRE at the time, was probably the single most helpful person at the church at the funeral. She stayed with me downstairs and helped me make a stress tool made out of beads and yarn. You'd think that at this point I would have found my true community, but it wasn't. I couldn't go to the church. It was too painful. And for the next few years, I dealt with my dad's abusive ex-girlfriend who controlled everything I did. We also lived in West Jordan, so my dad didn't want to drive me all that way. So for 3 years, I barely came at all. Until one day, during my junior high career, I decided to come back. I was immediately welcomed by people such as Bob Burns, Annika Searles, Liz Martin, and Nolan Newbold. And in SVUS fashion, my first day back, they threw me into helping out at the future coming-of-age service. Great! Now I would be involved and have to come back. And I did come back, week after week, until the end of the service, where I shared a poem. That was my 8th grade year, so I was bridging into the high school group. That was a scary prospect because I loved my junior high community and didn't want to leave them, especially my friend Annika. We started the ninth grade year off going to a ministry revival convention in Portland. There I traveled with some of the greatest people I've ever met, Cade, Anna, and Josh. And fast forward to now, Annika is in the high school group, and with me and Cade and Anna and Simeon and Grant and Julia, I have some of the best friends I've ever had. South Valley has been a place of community for me. It has brought me many life experiences, from bingo night, making pancake breakfasts, coffee shop Sunday, mystery pals, various cons, of course Liz's Pokemon Go adventures, and soon GA. I have found a place where I am truly home. Thank you.
I want to thank It's amazing. It's also time for me to welcome forward the children for the Time for All Ages. So young and young at heart, come on forward. Go sit down. So I have a story today. Tell stories. Kind of, maybe. We'll see. It's about a town far, far away, and the people who lived there, and they didn't have a church building. They met in people's houses and stuff, and someone said, I think we need a building of our own. And so they started about building one. And all the people pitched in, they collected the lumber, I'm sure it was sustainably raised and harvested. Poured a foundation, or made a foundation, whatever, and put all the stuff in the church, and everything. Everybody in the town helped, from the very youngest all the way up to the oldest, did what they could do to be a part of making this church building happen. And so finally it was the day that it was finished, and a little girl spoke up and she said, Dad, I don't see any lights in the church. How are we going to have our first worship this evening if we don't have lights tonight? And he said, just wait and see. And so they went back down to the village. Am I on? No, just not talking into it enough, am I? There we go. They went back down to the village because the church was sort of on a hillside just above the village. And they had dinner and got all their stuff together and ready to go back up. And still, this little girl was so worried. So worried. Just kidding. Was so worried about how they were going to have lights. Are we going to worship in a dark room tonight? This isn't going to work. And still, her dad said, don't worry about it. Everything's going to be fine. We'll take care of it. And so, as they left to go, her dad lit a lamp and brought it so they could see the path on their way. And as she looked around, she saw on all the paths leading up the hillside, there were people with their lamps. So they came to the church building, and all around the church building were hooks and spots for the lamps to hold and hang. And as all the people's lamps came in, suddenly the church was filled with light. And her dad said, look, there's no church without the people. We're the ones who bring the light to the church. We're the ones who make this happen. And so, maybe we have some electric lighting now, but metaphorically, we're the ones who come together to make a church. This is just an empty building and no one's inside it. The church isn't a building, it's the people who are a part of it. And so as you go off your activities, I want to thank you to think about everything you do to be a part of this community. Because nothing happens if we're not doing it. So let's sing out loud to your activities. Have a great time. Joys and concerns I lifted up earlier, for new babies entering our community, and for those working so hard to make a world in which all people are welcome and loved and honored. I also want to share with you these words of prayer from our colleague, the Reverend Gordon McKeeman, known to one and all as Bucky. He wrote, "Ministry is all that we do together. Ministry is that quality of being in community that affirms human dignity, that beckons forth hidden possibilities, invites us into deeper, more constant, reverent relationships, and carries forward our heritage of hope and liberation. Ministry is what we do together as we celebrate triumphs of our human spirit, miracles of birth and life, wonders of devotion and sacrifice. Ministry is what we do together with one another in terror and torment, in grief, in misery and pain, enabling us in the presence of death to say yes to life. We who minister speak and live the best we know with full knowledge that it is never quite enough. And yet we are reassured by lostness found, fragments reunited, wounds healed, and joy shared. Ministry is what we all do together.
Sisters, let's
It is our practice here at South Valley to split our worship service offerings with a charitable organization or program that aligns with our values and principles. For March and April, it will go to the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center of Northern Utah, who is dedicated to the care and rehabilitation of wildlife with the goal of releasing them into their natural habitats. They served more than 2,500 birds and small mammals in 2018. They provide wildlife and environmental educational programs to our larger community here in Utah. Will you join with me in saying the words printed in the order of service for our offering? We are this church. We are its hands, its heart, its voice. Together we share the wealth of this community and sustain it with our gifts.
have a reading this morning from the Reverend Marcus Hartleaf, and he speaks about the UU congregation where he served as an intern, which is actually the same one I now serve as senior co-minister, the UU Church of Birth. He writes, "The Unitarian Universalist congregation where I served as an intern made a mosaic tree of life the summer before I arrived. Congregants of all ages came together to craft the tree's leaves using bits and pieces of broken ceramics, jewelry, glass, and stone. There are many precious personal items in the tree, including a fragment of the Berlin Wall, a father's watch face, pieces of great-grandmother's china, and a key to the front door of a loved home. Like the members of the community that brought them together, each part is imbued with memories and meaning. Each fragment holds a piece of truth. Unitarian Universalists are mosaic makers. We are a people who bring together the broken pieces of our histories and the shining pieces of our seeking, and piece by piece create a mosaic religion. Our tree of life is found in the stories of our living tradition. The bead from a transformational moment of worship at a youth conference. A bit of paper stamped with the blazing emblem of the Unitarian Service Committee that saved lives during World War II. The button or patch on a backpack that proudly proclaims the first justice issue that lit our souls on fire. But our mosaic making tells another story too, one that is often more difficult to see, one that is essential to the purpose of religious community. One that lies not in the beautiful and broken bits and pieces, but in the grout. Grout. That chalky, gritty stuff that's squeezed between the cracks of tiles. In a mosaic, the grout holds the image together, unifying disparate pieces into a whole. The grout of a community takes years to lay and settle. Grout happens in board meetings and committee meetings and endless emails and slow-moving institutions. It's in weekly potlucks shared by neighbors or a ride to church, coffee in the social hall after worship. While the folks who show up for church only on Christmas and Easter will hopefully enjoy the beauty of the mosaic they find, they may never know the power of the grout that holds us through all seasons of life. We help to make the grout when we learn each other's names, when we reach out across generational divides. We help to make the grout when we show up on Sunday morning without having checked first to see if we're interested in the sermon topic. When a newborn arrives to be blessed by the community, it's the grout that enables us to welcome them. And it's in the grout that we rest when we gather to grieve and memorialize a beloved one who has died. And so let us honor the grout. And thus ends our reading. So I want to thank you again for welcoming me. I tried to count last night and I probably forgot something, but I think this is the 38th UU congregation I've preached in. And I'm almost certain it's the 13th different state. So thank you for letting me check those new state and congregation off. And that's not really much of a brag because my mentor, the person I interned with, the minister I interned with, the Reverend John Behrens, who you may have heard of because he was the president of the UUA some years ago, he told me once that he stopped counting at 600 UU congregations. Now about 400 of those he probably visited during his time as president, so he had a leg up on me there. But he has now preached in every state and several other countries to UU congregations. And I say that just because I want you to know that I like to visit new congregations and places, and I'm so thankful you're having me here in from the Bay Area, where, as you heard earlier, I'm one of the senior co-ministers of the UU Church of Berkeley. And again, I serve as a regional transitions coach, helping congregations like this one that are in the process of seeking a new settled minister. One of the things I like most about that is seeing the context that UU congregations are in and seeing the differences and similarities. I told Bob before service that I am not especially familiar with the LDS context, so if I say something that hits you wrong, I apologize right now, and I totally didn't mean it. I don't think I have anything to say wrong, but all those congregations, though, I've seen a lot of things. Big groups and small groups in huge buildings, big groups in 2 small buildings, churches that are in the middle of the city, or tucked away on a back road, old congregations and new congregations, and we could talk about the differences all day long. And today, what I want to share with you is one of the things that I see as a similar common thread that comes from our tradition, which is sharing. So here's the thesis sentence of my sermon. If you remember nothing else, remember this. We are better together. We are better together. And we are better when we share our gifts and our resources and our responsibilities, our authority even, yes, and our time, because there's not one of us that can do it all, and the people who I have seen try to do it all, it doesn't end very well. They usually burn out, or they run away, or something else. I learned this lesson the hard way. I'm a recovering try-to-do-it-all-yourself guy, okay? So I don't come at you from a position on high on this. I really don't. I was as bad as anyone. I was not the person you wanted in your group project in school. Or maybe you did, because I would do it all. I guess it sort of depends on your outlook there. But I learned this the hard way through messing up. And I know this now because my background, a lot of it is in pursuits that require extensive collaboration. I didn't know what the music would be this morning, but it's actually a great example of this, because I was going to talk about being a singer and having an accompanist that is really good, because they cover up all your mistakes. You know, when you accidentally skip an entire line of the piece and they catch up with you right away, because I've done that. And they go at your tempo, or, encourage you to get to the right tempo. Either way, sometimes it works both ways. But someone who supports you and is with you 100% and makes your music better than it would be by itself. And I was a journalist too. Stay with me for a second. Because you have to have a very sort of loose, differentiated idea about your writing when you're a journalist. We're not novelists who can pore over every word and think of it as our babies, because your editors and headline writers and your fellow reporters are going to tell you things you don't want to hear that are also going to make your story better. They're going to change things, sometimes without consulting with you, that is your editors. And 9 out of 10 times it'll be better, and you kind of have to get over the other one time. And so as a reporter, I learned to get over myself. I am my own worst editor, so anyone else is better than that. Editors change your stuff, they make it better, usually. And besides, the other thing I had to learn is that no newspaper story is my story. It's a story about a thing or a person or a place, and it's the newspaper's story. Because no newspaper is a one-person show, at least none but the very smallest. And so if a newspaper is not a one-person show, neither, I hope it's clear, is any congregation. We are better together. Now, we could go one by one through the religions of the world and talk about how they do things differently, hierarchical or not hierarchical, those that reserve certain types of ministry for certain types of people. I'm not an expert in every religious tradition in the world, but I've seen a lot of them, and there's a lot of different ways to do this, and there's some strengths and weaknesses to each one. I'm a big fan of ours with all its weaknesses. We Unitarian Universalists do something radical that I'm imagining doesn't seem radical to most of us anymore. We share ministry. Yes, we have ordained people and lay people, we have staff and volunteer, we have new and old, people all leading together and contributing to these things we call congregations, and this larger thing we call Unitarian Universalism. And unlike some traditions, we celebrate that fact. We think it's among our greatest strengths that everyone has a chance to contribute. Moreover, that everyone has a say, and all members have a vote in the decisions that most affect them. We're not unique in this, but we're pretty far out on the end of that spectrum. There are other traditions that share ministry widely and understand that all people are involved in doing ministry, but our version is among the most radical. So this idea of shared ministry, I always like to talk about this when I'm talking to people in my work as a regional transitions coach, because it's key to what we're doing. So often, let me say this, when I visit a congregation in transition between ministers, or in another kind of transition between locations or other changes really, things can be really tough. There's grief, I expect that. There's conflict, a lot more than you would think, or just confusion about what's next. In talking to the board and other people, that's not the sense I've gotten mostly from those here. It seems like you're all on a really good track, and that's great. I know from the exit interviews I did that there was a strong relationship and a mutual relationship with your last minister. And though I know there's grief and change at her departure, that's not all there is. I got the sense that there was a lot of love and a lot of appreciation and a lot of success too. But let me talk for a second about the history of shared ministry in our tradition. For hundreds of years at least, and in some cases more than that, we've been a people that believe that all of us are doing ministry. Whether we're ordained or not, whether we have any title or not, whether somebody calls it a ministry or not. We do ordain ministers, yes, and they have some special training. They've been called by congregations to their work. But we also believe that all of us have a calling. And though for most of us it's not to ordain ministry, it's not any less of a calling, just a different one. Martin Luther, who inadvertently started the Reformation, famously observed that the church was a priesthood of all believers. He said you didn't need some functionary with a title to tell you what you believed or to interpret some sacred writing for you. His idea was that you could figure that out yourself. Perhaps with some support and guidance, sure, but that you could do it yourself. Several hundred years later, the Unitarian theologian and ethicist James Luther Adams made a corollary statement. He said, not only is there a priesthood of all believers, but there's a prophethood of all believers too. That we, each of us, and all of us together, can speak up and can act in the world in the ways that we see fit. That we are not only able to, but are required to call out injustice when we see it and attempt to make it right. And so I said earlier that we celebrate the fact that all of us here participate in a congregation's decision-making process. And so nowhere is this more clear, perhaps nowhere more important, than in the process to call a minister. So you've already been a part of choosing a team to guide this process. We're going to recognize and honor them in a few minutes. You will fairly soon, in the next few months, be asked for input early in the search process about both the congregation you see today and the minister that might be right for it. And that team, the search committee, will update you on the progress they make as they work on your behalf, sometimes confidentially. They can't always share everything with you, but they're going to share a lot about the process they're using at least. And in the end, you will have a week to meet and hear from your candidate. In fact, it's 9 days, and it's a hard 9 days for candidates, I gotta tell you, having done it a couple times myself. And after that, you will vote on whether or not to call them. I've left out a few steps in the process, and we can talk about those too, but that's essentially the search process as we do it in Unitarian Universalist congregations. And you'll notice the parts I highlighted, because a lot of the process, the whole congregation has a role in. And of course, shared ministry doesn't end with calling a new minister. In fact, it really just starts there. With a new ministry, you'll live into a new kind of shared ministry as you grow and learn together. You'll find out that, gasp, they aren't good at everything. I usually get more laughs for that, but thanks. I appreciate it. That minister will find out that you aren't good at everything either. And maybe, in the best of worlds, those not good parts will match up and you'll support each other in them. Or maybe you'll decide that some of those things aren't that important and that you And so I urge all of you to be as involved in the process as you can in this coming year. And I will stress many times to the search committee until they get tired of me hearing it, that they need to keep all of the congregation as informed as possible about what's going on. And I share this with you too. Everything will be okay. Search can be really stressful for ministers and for congregations. It is often full of ups and downs, sometimes missed connections, and sometimes fortunate connections. And in the end, you will come out with your next minister. Hopefully on the timeline that we've identified, but sometimes it takes a little longer. And so as this congregation begins its search for its next spiritual leader, I want to remind you that it's not a one-way street either. Because you are not just calling a minister, but they are calling you too. What might you be called together to do? What might you be called to do together? Maybe so. I want to invite all of us to rise in body or spirit and sing our closing song, number 20. Be thou, I forgot something. I skipped totally introducing the Ministerial Search Committee. I'm sorry. I just said we were going to do that, and then I forgot it. So I invite forward Lori to help me. We'll sing it.
But first, in the spirit of shared ministry, first let me thank all of you who submitted nominations. The board could not have done this alone, and we had so many great members of our congregation nominated. We have tried to balance our search committee members between new members, older members, or I should say more long-term members. We have a youth representative. We do have an older member. So we tried to find a good representation of our whole congregation. So as I introduce people, would you please stand and stay standing? So first of all, Chris Berg, Laura Renshaw, Brian Debick, and I believe he's out of town. This is spring break weekend, so. Bob Spicer. Cade Croxford is our youth representative, and I believe he's downstairs with the high school kids. Cinnamon Wolf and Maureen Davies. Cinnamon's back. Let's give all of these people our thanks for serving.
All right, now rise in body or spirit, and we'll sing together number 20, Be Thou My Vision. Join with me in these words to extinguish our chalice. We extinguish this chalice, but not for the light of truth or the energy of action, upset this wasn't exactly what y'all usually do, so that was not my fault. So please be seated for our post. Friends, I leave you with these closing words. May this continue to be our vision. We are better together. And in all we do, may we hold that close. And so with that, our worship has ended and our service begins.